Right. Let's dive in. Bagaraatan,
Hmm.
just saying the name. Bagaraatan. It's got this great ring to it, hasn't it?
It really does. And the meaning behind it, too.
Yeah. Small hunter, or small beast of prey, I think, in Mongolian.
That's it. Instantly gives you this picture, this image.
Totally. Something agile, maybe a bit underestimated. So today we're doing a deep dive, you and I, into this specific dinosaur.
Yep, Bagaraatan. It's a Late Cretaceous theropod found in Mongolia's Nemec Formation. Really fascinating place.
And we've got some good source material to work from here.
Yeah, the Wikipedia entry you shared is actually a really solid starting point. It pulls together the current scientific thinking, the research, the debates even.
Good. So our mission today is basically to unpack what we know, or maybe what we think we know, about Bagaraatan.
Exactly, because it's been a bit of a puzzle for paleontologists, and understanding why is, well, part of the story.
And it sounds like the puzzle started right from the get-go. The initial descriptions, they were a bit contradictory.
That's putting it mildly. You had this situation where the main body bones, the postcranial stuff,
Right.
looked quite bird-like. Light, maybe built for speed.
Okay, bird-like.
But then you look at the skull fragments they had associated with it, and they seem to be pulling features from different theropod groups.
Huh. So, not a clean match. It wasn't obviously one thing or another.
Not at all. It was like a bit of this, a bit of that. Your analogy earlier was pretty good. A sports car chassis with a truck grill. Something didn't quite add up.
That immediately signals there's a story here, right? Some scientific detective work needed.
Absolutely. And that initial odd mix actually led to a really crucial finding, a kind of aha moment.
Okay.
It turned out that the original collection of fossils wasn't from just one dinosaur.
Ah,
It was what paleontologists call a chimera.
right, a chimera, not the mythical beast.
No, nothing like that. In paleontology, it just means a collection of bones from different individuals, maybe even different species, that got mistakenly grouped together initially.
So bones from maybe two or more different dinosaurs all mixed up.
Precisely. And this is a key point, actually. It shows how science works, how it corrects itself. Initial ideas get tested, re-examined.
And sometimes overturned. So what parts didn't belong to Bagaraatan?
Well, digging deeper, researchers identified several of those initially included bones specifically, some hand bones, a left femur, a tibiotarsus, which is a lower leg bone fused to ankle bones,
Okay.
and even a rib. These parts were later flagged as belonging to a different type of dinosaur altogether.
Wow. So quite a few key pieces.
Yes. They were identified as belonging to an indeterminate canagnathed. That's a group of feathered, often toothless dinosaurs.
Canagnathed. Like
Yeah.
Oviraptor's cousins.
Sort of in that ballpark, yeah. And they even think these specific bones might belong to a known canagnathed called Elmosaurus, which is also found in the Nemec Formation.
So you can almost picture the researchers years later maybe looking super closely and going, wait a second, this texture, this shape, this doesn't match the jawbone at all.
Exactly that kind of meticulous work. Real detective stuff.
Okay, so they removed the canagnathed bits. What was actually left? What defines Bagaraatan now?
What remained is now the official holotype. That's the single specimen that formally defines the species, Bagaraatan ostromi.
The gold standard.
Right. And that holotype consists of the mandible, the lower jaw parts of the axial skeleton, so vertebrae.
A backbone.
Yep. The pelvis, and actually just one toe bone, a pedal phalanx.
So really our whole understanding now rests on just those specific pieces.
That's right. Everything we currently think about Bagaraatan is based on interpreting those fossils.
And what do those fossils tell us? Because the story must have shifted quite a bit.
Oh, definitely. Based on this much smaller but hopefully consistent set of bones, the current scientific thinking is, well, pretty different.
Okay.
The consensus now is that Bagaraatan, the holotype material, likely represents a tyrannosaurid.
Tyrannosaurid, like related to T-Rex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In that same major group. And what's really intriguing is that it's thought to be a juvenile tyrannosaurid, possibly one of the smallest, youngest ones known from that particular time and place.
Wow, so the small hunter might actually have been a young tyrant king, or at least a close relative.
Potentially.
Hmm.
The features they see in the jaw, the vertebrae, they show similarities to young specimens of big guys like Tyrannosaurus and its close Asian relative, Tarbosaurus.
That's a fantastic twist. From maybe bird-like to mixed up to a young tyrannosaur.
It's quite the journey, but it wasn't always straightforward getting to this current view either. The source material, mentions how its classification bounced around a bit before settling here.
Right, because that initial mixed bag of bones must have caused some confusion.
Understandably so. You had different researchers looking at potentially different subsets of that mixed material, or just interpreting the limited data differently.
So what were some of the other ideas?
Well, back in '96, Thomas Holtz classified it as a basal tyrannosauridea.
Basal meaning, like an early, more primitive member of the Tyrannosaur group.
Exactly, sitting lower down on the family tree. But then Corey suggested it might be a troodontid.
Troodontid. That's quite different. Aren't they usually smaller, maybe more slender?
Generally, yes. Known for relatively large brains compared to body size, too. And then you had Rauhut, who in 2003 placed it within Maniraptor.
Maniraptora. That's a huge group, isn't it? Includes birds, oviraptorosaurs, dromaeosaurs.
A very broad group, yes. So you can see the uncertainty. Basal tyrannosauroid, troodontid, general Maniraptoran. It really shows the challenge of working with fragmentary fossils.
Definitely. Different experts, same bones, different conclusions. It highlights how interpretation plays a role.
It does. And this is where things like cladistics come in, trying to map out these relationships visually.
With those branching diagrams, the cladograms.
Right. The source mentions one by Lowen and colleagues from 2013. They placed Bagaraatan within basal tyrannosauridea, sort of after Eotyrannus but before Raptorex.
So still in that early Tyrannosaur branch, but kind of intermediate?
According to that analysis, yes. But then there's more recent work mentioned.
Science marching on.
Always. A 2024 phylogenetic analysis by Soyak and colleagues found something a bit different.
Okay, what did they find?
Their results put Bagaraatan in what's called a poletomy.
Poletomy.
Sounds complex. Just means an unresolved branching point on the evolutionary tree. Think of it like a fork in the road where you can't quite tell which path split off first.
So less certainty about the exact sequence.
Exactly. They found it grouping with more derived, more advanced tyrannosauroids actually within the main Tyrannosauridae family.
So closer to T-Rex and Tarbosaurus, maybe?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
But in this unresolved cluster. So closely related to them, but the precise relationship among them and Bagaraatan couldn't be pinned down by their analysis.
Interesting. Still a bit fuzzy then.
And there's a really important reason for that fuzziness, which the 2024 study emphasized.
Which is?
It comes back to the specimen likely being a juvenile.
Ah, right. The age issue. How does being young mess up the analysis?
Yeah. Well, young animals often retain features from their earlier evolutionary history. Features their adult forms might lose or change significantly.
Okay.
So when you plug those juvenile features into a phylogenetic analysis, the algorithm might interpret them as being more primitive or basal than the animal actually would be if it were fully grown.
Gotcha. So the young Bagaraatan might look artificially early on the family tree just because it hadn't finished growing and developing its adult features yet.
That's the concern. The 2024 researchers explicitly caution that because the holotype is probably young, its exact phylogenetic spot is still a bit uncertain.
So it might actually be even more closely related to the later, bigger tyrannosaurids than the current data suggests.
It's certainly possible. We might need an adult specimen to really know for sure. It's like trying to predict exactly what a mature oak tree will look like just by studying a small sapling.
Makes perfect sense. The fossil record gives us snapshots. And sometimes those snapshots are of individuals still under development.
Precisely. But even with that uncertainty about its exact placement, we do have a sense of its size.
Right, the small hunter. How small are we talking?
The estimates put it at around 3 to 4 meters long, so maybe 10 to 13 feet.
Okay, so not huge like a T-Rex, but definitely not tiny either, especially if that's a juvenile size.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a potentially medium-sized predator, possibly a young member of the dominant predator family of the time.
So wrapping up our deep dive on Bagaraatan, it's quite a journey.
It really is.
We started with this cool name, Small Hunter, from the Late Cretaceous Nemec Formation in Mongolia.
Then the big reveal that the first fossil collection was a chimera, a mix of different dinosaurs.
Yeah, with some parts likely belonging to a kinecnithid, maybe Elmosaurus.
Leaving us with the holotype, the jaw, vertebrae, pelvis, toe bone, which points strongly towards
A tyrannosaurid, and most likely a young one.
Yep. And we traced the history, the different ideas, basal, tyrannosauroid, troodontid, maniraptoran, before landing on the current, a still slightly fuzzy picture.
Fuzzy, mainly because of that juvenile issue potentially skewering the phylogenetic results.
Exactly. The most recent analysis puts it near the derived tyrannosaurids, but in an unresolved spot.
It's just a brilliant example of how science works, isn't it? constantly refining, reevaluating based on new evidence or new ways of looking at old evidence.
Absolutely. That self-correcting process is fundamental. The Bagaraatan story shows it perfectly, from initial misinterpretation to a much clearer, yet still evolving understanding.
Which leaves us with a really interesting thought, maybe something for you listening to chew on.
If this Bagaraatan holotype really is a juvenile,
Hmm.
what did the adult look like?
Right. How big did it get? Would its adult features confirm its place near T-Rex, or would it reveal something completely unexpected about Tyrannosaur diversity?
Finding an adult could potentially shift our understanding again. It's a great reminder that every fossil is a clue, part of a huge ancient puzzle that we're still piecing together, discovery by discovery.